It's no surprise at this point that Shadow is by far my favorite character in this franchise. I mean, I literally made a video explaining this, but, long story short, I said in that video that I adored his writing in games like Adventure 2, Heroes, and 06. These three games captured the essence of Shadow's character, displaying his strength, introversion, heroism, his caring nature, especially when it came to his friends, and I mean, just look at this design. How could you not think this is badass? Sorry Terios, maybe another time. But, say it with me now, the 2010s happened. And Shadow's character became flanderized as this over-the-top dark edgelord that he was often joked to be. Although, to be fair, we did also see this in the Shadow the Hedgehog game. Now, look, I don't hate the idea of Shadow being a bit edgy or dark. In fact, I like it, and understand that it's a part of his character. But that's the point. It's a part of his character. Just one characteristic of many that made up the Shadow that we all know and love. And I'm sure you can all see the problem when it basically becomes his only characteristic.
You're weak. And you know what makes you weak? Your loyalty to your pathetic friends.
Yeah, safe to say this wasn't the best era for Shadow. Or anybody for that matter. But then, something changed. An almost resurgence of the Sonic franchise occurred. Especially thanks to the movies helping to popularize the IP with general audiences. And again, I do have videos about those. Plus, we got the likes of Sonic Frontiers, which, whilst not perfect, was received really positively by many. I mean, even I, the arsehole that I am, enjoyed that game. Except for most of the cyberspace stages, a good chunk of the third island, the overabundance of 2D sections that locked your camera, the strange mini-games, the short levels. I swear, I like this game. Anyways, after the success of Sonic Frontiers, I was excited to see what Sonic Team had in store, and it was a remaster of Sonic Generations? Whoopee. Wait, hang on a minute. Now you got my attention. Yes, it was a remaster, but it also came with a whole new game just slapped right on there. I mean, 2 for 1 at a great price, that's fucking unheard of in this day and age of gaming. Huh, I guess Sega really does what Nintendo don't. And with that, we got the release of Shadow Generations. Over a year ago. Okay, I need to stop doing that. But man, this game was fantastic. I'm not here to give a full game review or anything, but if you haven't played it yet, what the hell are you doing? This game has some brilliant level design, great controls, refines the open zone formula introduced in Frontiers, looks great even on the Switch, which has about as much horsepower as my Nokia brick, and, of course, has some brilliant writing. But, as always, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's take a much deeper look at the story of Shadow Generations and discuss what made Shadow's character so amazing here. So, the story kicks off over 50 years ago, I know, shocking, with Gerald and Maria entering the room aboard the Ark where Shadow was born? Awakened? Released? I don't know. For the first time, and I love how soft Gerald is in this scene and how excited Maria is. You can really tell how important Shadow is to both of them even before he was released. God, I hope nothing bad ever happens to her. The scene then nicely transitions into the present with Shadow in the very same room, looking around in an almost introspective manner. But why is Shadow even aboard the Ark? Well, that takes us back to before the release of the game to the Dark Beginnings prologue animation. Now, I've made an entire video dissecting this, but, long story short, Shadow was being haunted by past memories and gets the feeling that something, or someone, was calling him back to the space colony Ark. And so Shadow, thanks to the help of Rouge and Omega, stole a gun space shuttle and took off for the Ark to investigate. And that's what takes us back to the present. We then get this shot of Shadow staring over the Earth as it seems to be undergoing some sort of nuclear apocalypse, but it is a genuinely nice shot that sort of mirrors the many times Shadow has stared down at Earth from this very Ark in the past. Usually with Maria. But Shadow does get contacted by Rouge via a walkie-talkie. Sure. And we get a nice little exchange between Shadow and Rouge, and much like in Dark Beginnings, it's nice to see them acting like friends again, with Rouge still trying to get Shadow to come to Sonic's birthday party, and Shadow responding with his usual, still as introverted as ever, I see. It's nice to see these interactions, because it reminds us that Team Dark was actually a thing. Something that I'd been sorely missing before Dark Beginnings showed up, because Sega tried so desperately to get rid of this idea of Shadow having friends. Sonic Forces tried to have these three acting as a team again, but they barely interacted at all. I guess you could say it felt pretty forced. We also get Shadow telling us that Gunn detected an unusual biosignature aboard the Ark, so I guess Shadow is just cool with Gunn again? Makes you wonder why he chose the route of breaking and entering, but oh well. And before you know it, the Ark starts going haywire with visual distortions and illusions, with Shadow wasting no time jumping into business and making his way through the Ark, only to learn that this is all being caused by a returning Black Doom, who fucks with multiple levels that Shadow goes through in all sorts of cool and trippy ways. And what is important here is that he keeps bringing Shadow back to Radical Highway, the very first level that Shadow was ever playable in, so it holds some significance in that manner. Let's just hope it doesn't get the Green Hill treatment. And we do get some subtle foreshadowing about Black Doom's plans as he talks about the promised time rising once more, and talking about how Shadow cannot deny his fate. Obviously referring back to Shadow the Hedgehog. You know, if the existence of Black Doom wasn't a big enough reference. Anyways, Shadow eventually makes it to a room containing the fake emerald that Tails made all the way back in Adventure 2. Wait, sorry, what? How?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
But even he mentions how he struggles to distinguish it from the normal yellow emerald, which will be important later. But enough about that, because suddenly a wild Time Eater appears and transports Shadow to the white space, where he awakens seeing this interesting black moon that would make Bloodborne blush, as well as seeing Omega, and I love the exchanges between them. Again, it feels as though they're friends, and it gives a lot of personality to Omega. Even the little things like asking Shadow to seek out Rouge because she's a valuable asset to them, or him saying that it's good to work with Shadow because he doesn't express useless terms like restraint and mercy. We also do get other interactions with characters like Rouge, which I discussed in her character analysis video, and also a couple of others which I'll get into later in this video. But I will say that it is unfortunate that these are relegated to basic text boxes with no voiceovers, but still, it works. It's also around this point in the story that Shadow begins to unlock and use his new Doom powers, stating that it feels natural to use, despite never having a power like it. I'll go into more depth about these Doom powers and what they represent later, as I believe they are pertinent to displaying important aspects of Shadow's character. But as Shadow contemplates his newfound abilities, he's suddenly shocked to seemingly see Maria. But before they can run to each other, Gerald stops her, and then they fade into the distance, with Shadow stating that he's just seeing things and that he needs to focus on the mission at hand, not chase dreams. It's interesting that he refers to these as dreams, implying that he wishes to see them once again and hasn't quite completely come to terms with his past, or at the very least, hasn't fully moved on. Something that will make up the crux of Shadow's journey moving forward in this game. And supporting this is the old Adventure 2 flashback we get of Maria's final words to Shadow before she got capped, clearly showing that those events still weigh on Shadow's mind. Plus, it's a cool touch that Shadow's original theme from SA2 is playing over this flashback, really helping this tragedy to feel cemented at one point, whilst also just being a nice callback to Adventure 2. But yeah, here's where the basic formula of the game really kicks off, with you taking on 2 acts per zone before fighting a boss and moving on. The choice of stages are generally good and represent Shadow's past well. I mean, I won't complain about seeing Rail Canyon, and Kingdom Valley was my favourite stage in the game. But what the hell was Chaos Island doing here? I get that you can have any stage from any point in time, but Shadow has never been playable in Chaos Island. So it feels weird to see that here of all choices instead of something from, oh, I don't know, the Shadow the Hedgehog game? Maybe Digital Circuit or Glyphic Canyon? Hell, I'll even take a Westopolis, my man. Regardless though, all these stages were well designed and a lot of fun to play through. And you know what else was great? The bosses. Not just for their gameplay and spectacle, but for some of the interactions Shadow can have with them. Take the Biolizard for example, Gerald's failed attempt at an ultimate life form. You get the sense that Shadow feels almost sorry for the Biolizard, with him saying lines like,
You tortured soul, I will end your suffering. Stop struggling and cling to a cruel fate.
I mean, you kind of understand why when this thing is probably the closest Shadow has to a biological sibling. So he just wants to put it out of its misery, almost as a form of compassion, because that's all he can really do for it. Then there's Metal Overlord that Shadow just verbally destroys by belittling him and showcasing his superiority, with Metal referring to himself as the ultimate life form and Shadow responding with,
True ultimate life form, done.
he's just so nonchalant about his entire existence, and I just think that's kind of badass. And Shadow has always had a little bit of that superiority to him, so it's not something that's out of character.
Faker, I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Ha! You're not even good enough to be my those words.
Or one of my absolute favorites.
Chaos control!
Mephiles was an interesting fight because technically Shadow doesn't know him since the events of 06 were wiped out, as showcased by Shadow not recognizing the Scepter of Darkness. But I do like how the writers show a bit of Shadow's experience and intelligence with him identifying it as some kind of seal with nothing but a glance. And I really like how Mephiles tried to kill Shadow from behind, but Shadow just effortlessly dodges it. I guess Sonic should have just taken some lessons here. Getting back to the story though, we do get the first proper interaction with Black Doom where he talks about Shadow being his ultimate creation, with Shadow disregarding him and saying that he'll just destroy him again. Black Doom pushes back though, claiming that neither him or Shadow have been perfected yet, and only when that happens can they have their reckoning. So most of you can pretty much piece together what's going on here. I do find it interesting how Black Doom mentions that being in this temporal anomaly has been able to speed up his plans for reviving the Black Arms. So it does give some credence as to why he acts now instead of at another point in time. As Shadow continues on, he notices a few Black Arms chasing some girl which we know to be Maria, and promptly puts a stop to that. But what I love about this cutscene is that Shadow saves this girl before even realizing that it was Maria, clearly putting Shadow's heroism on display. He saw that someone was in trouble and wasted no time in helping her. Kinda reminding me of Sonic Heroes where Shadow, without a second thought, saves Rouge from Omega's open fire. Yes, Shadow might have a darker edge to him compared to someone like Sonic, but he will still do the right thing. Something that we've seen many times. Hell, even later in the story when Black Doom appears, Shadow wastes no time in jumping in front of Gerald and Maria to protect them. It's damn near instinctual. It's the little details like this that have become way more numerous in recent years, and I adore them. It's proof that we don't need constant big character moments that can feel forced, but even just a few small ones to showcase their characteristics in a natural way. And while we're talking about the small details, something that I really want to compliment this game on is its animation, because it does a fantastic job of showcasing Shadow's character in subtle and meaningful ways. Take the cutscenes for example, where he actually feels very expressive, like when he recognizes Maria here, allowing us to clearly read his emotions in a way that some other Sonic titles just haven't. Games like Forces or Lost World for example were quite stiff by comparison, so a lot of that expressiveness was lost. But here, you could remove the dialogue and still be able to read how Shadow feels from just his expressions. And this attention to detail carries over to the gameplay as well. Like when this giant missile is barreling towards you. Most other characters would try to avoid it, or make some sort of quip about its size.
Whoa, that's a big one!
But Shadow just calmly uses Chaos Control and a barrage of kicks to send it right back, before landing with this smooth as fuck roll and getting back to it. Shadow means business, and I love how even the way he's animated showcases his personality. But now, we've finally made it to our first proper interactions with Maria and Gerald. And these are some of the best parts about this story. Immediately, Shadow doesn't really say anything, only acting shocked before surmising that they must be from a point in time before the Ark raid and have somehow been subsumed into this anomaly. The only thing Shadow really says here is,
I'll be fine. We'll all be fine. Find somewhere safe to hide. I'll take care of everything.
His voice not only carries some form of misguided hope, but also desperation. He believes that this might be his second chance to be able to save his family, and so rushes off to continue the mission, believing that he can save them from their inevitable demise, instead of taking the time out to talk with them in that moment. making this reunion carry a somber undertone and once again showcasing how Shadow hasn't truly moved on from or fully accepted his past. I also just want to give major props to Kirk Thornton for his performance as Shadow. Before this, he sounded very generically gruff and, well, edgy. It wasn't bad, but it really didn't feel like Shadow. But here, his voice feels far more suited to the character, carrying actual weight and emotion, showing what a good script and direction can really do for a performance. I still overall prefer David Humphrey and Jason Griffith, but damn, this is a great showing for Kirk Thornton. It's shortly after this that we get Gerald revealing that Shadow was born of Black Doom's DNA, and importantly pointing out that their blood link means that as Shadow grows in power, so does Black Doom. So all this time, Black Doom has been purposefully waiting for Shadow to reach his apex and master all of his Doom powers, so that he can either take over Shadow's mind to have an ultimate weapon at his side, or take over his body to be reborn in him. Damn, giving off some real Orochimaru vibes here. But even with this revelation, Shadow remains confident. He bluntly states that Gerald made him the ultimate life form, completely dismissing Black Doom's claim over him. And I love that, because it reinforces the almost father-son relationship between Shadow and Gerald, and makes it clear who Shadow truly considers his creator. Anyways, we gotta take a quick break from dealing with these two because we finally get to see the interaction between Sonic and Shadow, but this time from Shadow's perspective. I wish we could have actually played this boss fight, but I guess they saw it as unnecessary since we already play it as Sonic. Still, I really like this encounter. And no, not just because of the reference to Heroes.
Yeah, sorry, but that Chaos Emerald and I have a date with a monster.
Well then, it'll be a date to die for.
He said it! He said it!
But because of what it says about Shadow's character. Throughout this fight, it's clear that Shadow is holding back. He's not mounting any real offense against Sonic. And when he briefly considers using his Doom powers, he stops himself, allowing Sonic to blindside him and take the emerald. The game tries to pass this off as Shadow's nobility, but I believe there's a deeper reason for his choice. And it's simply that he still hasn't accepted that part of him. Still seeing the Doom DNA and Doom powers as this evil that he doesn't want to use unless necessary. And again, I will explain the importance of this in just a bit. It turns out though, that Shadow intentionally got knocked out by Sonic so that he could drop the fake emerald from earlier in the game, tricking Sonic into taking that so that he could hold onto the real emerald for the time being. Again, that intelligence of Shadow is on full display here. We then get back to Maria and Gerald, only for Black Doom to appear once again and taunt Shadow, saying that the blood of the Black Arms flows through him, and that he's a warrior, a destroyer even. All the while, Shadow's anger grows to a point where he states that there will be no mistakes this time, and that he will crush every last one of them. But, just like in Dark Beginnings, Maria jumps in, quickly taking Shadow's hand and quells his rage, saying that it breaks her heart to see him so full of anger, and even goes on to tell him the reason why he was named Shadow.
Because without light, there's only darkness. But a shadow will show you where to find the light. Do you understand?
I love this aspect of their friendship. How Maria is almost this North Star for Shadow that stops him from getting lost in his own thoughts. And one detail that I really appreciate here is how Shadow just kind of looks around and runs away without saying a word. It plays into his introversion. He's not about to sit there and immediately open up about his feelings, cause that's just not the type of person that he is. Hell, even Maria knows this, cause she's pointed that out before.
You have a big heart. It may be difficult for you to express it, but I know that deep down you really do care. About me. About everyone.
But that doesn't mean that Maria's words mean any less to him. Again, it's the small details. And now it's time for the final showdown. Shadow is now fully complete and ready to face Black Doom. But this is where I want to finally talk about something that I've been teasing throughout this entire video. The Doom powers, and what they actually represent for Shadow as a character. All of this game, these powers have been presented as evil, dark, and corruptive, causing pain and involving all these darker colors. And whilst it is pretty cool, it starts to get more interesting when you look at this from an introspective perspective. Shadow getting these Doom powers is not a fun experience, causing immense pain, and he gains strength from the part of him that he's essentially repressed, with these powers being mutations to his Black Arm's DNA. He clearly despises these abilities, but more importantly, he despises what they represent. That part of him that comes from Black Doom. He treats it as a flaw, a stain, a problem to be removed. We even saw this in Dark Beginnings when Shadow was comparing himself to the captured alien.
The professor created me using alien DNA. The Black Arms, he called them. The same DNA as this larva. This ugly, heartless creature. I may look like a hedgehog, but I'm really no different than this thing.
He resents that part of him, believing it too makes him this ugly, heartless creature. And so, you can understand why he would dislike his Doom powers and actively choose not to use them in certain scenarios, like in the fight against Sonic. Yet, in this game, he needs to use abilities and powers from a source he despises in order to defeat that very source in the form of Black Doom. If Black Doom represents Shadow's darkness, then Maria represents his light. And it's this balance of both that allows Shadow to exist at all. It can't be one or the other. He has to accept both. I mean, it's literally in his name. And nothing showcases all of this more than this cutscene, where Shadow glows not only with the darker aura of his Doom powers, but also with the bright golden aura, almost reminiscent of a superform. And then there's Maria, who instantly worries that Shadow may once again be succumbing to the darkness, but Shadow simply holds out his hand, telling her that it's okay and that he's letting go of that destructive anger. But more importantly, that he will continue to fight with her wish for everyone to be happy in his heart. Before delivering a smile. Not a grin, not a cocky smirk, but a genuine smile to his best friend. Something that Shadow very rarely does. Really emphasizing the bond between these two. Now it's Shadow comforting Maria, something that we haven't seen. And this really showcases how much he's grown as a character. He's finally accepted that dark part of him, but uses it in a positive way, rather than repressing it or succumbing to it like he almost has on several occasions. And with this, he goes on to fight Neo Devil Doom in an epic fight where he uses these Doom powers to their full extent. But, by far, the ending of this fight is the most cathartic. Shadow hasn't just accepted what he is, but realizes that it doesn't define who he is. He's not just some soldier to do Black Doom's bidding, but he'll shape his own destiny, as Shadow the Hedgehog. And this talk of Shadow making his own destiny is actually something we've seen before in Sonic 06.
Every right to want justice.
That's absurd. Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it alone.
You forgive humanity this folly, then?
I determine my own destiny.
With Black Doom finally defeated, Shadow lands back in white space where we see his Doom powers being ripped from him, assumedly meaning that, much like the Werehog transformation, this will be the last we see of these powers. Which does kinda suck cause I thought they were pretty fun to use and thematically serve this idea of his acceptance of who he is further. But I do guess that it does show evidence that Black Doom is gone and that his connection to Shadow that we've seen all game has dissipated. But I do think that it would be great if these powers could stick around in the future. If for nothing else than giving Shadow more unique gameplay options that separate him from other playable characters like Sonic, where in the past they've played very similarly to each other. Rouge then appears, telling Shadow that they have to get the real Emerald to Sonic now and that Shadow should come immediately as Sonic may need his help. And I do like that Shadow entrusts Rouge to take the Emerald, another sign of their friendship. But Shadow has to settle something first and takes off towards Gerald and Maria. To Shadow, those two are the most important people in his life, and so he prioritizes them. But before they could catch up and sit around talking, they do begin to disappear, with Gerald realizing that they're returning to their own point in time, and Shadow's reaction is genuinely heartbreaking.
I'll stop Rouge. Use Chaos Control. Stop this moment in time.
Shadow? No.
Seeing Shadow like this, so desperate, so frantic, is unusual to say the least. Shadow tends to be more focused and quite stoic, not usually the type to let his emotions get the better of him. Yet here, we see those walls break down, and it's what makes all of this hit harder. He's literally willing to leave the world in its broken white space state just to be able to stay with Gerald and Maria. Maria is the one to stop him though, telling him that his friends still need him, and as Shadow protests, Maria simply says this.
I know I'll see you again. And if fate draws us apart, I will always be in your heart.
Maria.
One of my favorite little details here is that you can see Shadow slightly quivering as he watches his one chance to be with his family fade away in front of him. But Shadow eventually finds his resolve and takes off, running right past Rouge, where Shadow lets out a tear that hits her in the face. A single tear, much like he did in Adventure 2, and both times, it was because of Maria. Whether he sees her again or not, Maria will always have an impact on him. The light shines even when the star is gone, and that light is what exists in Shadow. It is genuinely incredible how one game can do so much damage control for a character, and this story isn't even that long. If anything, I would have liked more, and that's without me even diving into more of the smaller details that we got from cutscenes and text boxes alike. For example, learning that Gerald had 2 sons, or that Maria had a sister. There's so much that's actually here if you look close enough. But without a doubt, the star here is of course Shadow. I'm so glad that his character has been brought back, revived from existing as simply Edgy the Hedgy into the complex 3-dimensional character that he always was, and I can't get enough of it. Hopefully, this excellent writing continues as we move forward to future projects. But, as always, only time will tell. Well, thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, then why not leave a like, subscribe, and turn notifications on to keep up with all future content. If you want to go above and beyond with your support, and help me get through medical school, then feel free to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description as always. And a massive shout out to all of my amazing patrons. You guys are legends. But with all that said, I'll see you guys next time.